Yeah. And I tried.
Okay. Hi, good afternoon and welcome again to our annual luncheon and thank you for coming. I want to especially thank, as people know, Justice Faye and I have been putting this on religiously with Judge Christian and Christian, and she will not always acknowledge it, so she's gonna, he is here. Okay, anyway, so and I really wanted to lend a special thanks to Mara Rodriguez this year. She really was instrumental. I was in a pretty rough place this year and Mara really reached in and kept reaching in until I reached back out. And so she's really the driving force behind this lunch today. And I really want to thank her for all of her effort, her late nights, her early mornings, and for all of you for agreeing to speak today. This is a very brave thing. With that, I'm going to hand it over. I spotted her. There she is. And we have a very special person to introduce another very special person. So thank you again for coming. And then we'll have.
Thank you all for coming. Delightful to be here. I had no idea I was going to have the honor of introducing Dana, but I can do this on the fly because she needs no introduction, and it is my absolute privilege to introduce her. Justice Day served on the Alaska bench for nearly 28 years, as you all know. She was appointed in '96 to the Alaska Supreme Court, the first woman to serve in capacity, and of course she served 3 terms as Chief Justice. All of that followed her start in Alaska as a law clerk for Ed Berger on the Alaska Supreme Court, and of course she was the Chief Public Defender for our state. Dana also served as the president of the National Association of Women Judges and has worked extensively with federal courts. I think you all know that as well. So I'm really not telling you anything new. She has retired from the bench now and has a private mediation practice where she continues to shine. I want to thank Dana for all of her years doing this very important diversity lunch because it contributes so much for all of us. And to say that I miss her in my current job and to thank her for her years.
We treat to have Morgan do this introduction. I was by myself as the only woman on the Alaska Supreme Court for about 13 years when Morgan was appointed as the second woman on the Alaska Supreme Court. And I've told this story before, but I don't think at this event, because it made such a burning impression and again, my male colleagues were wonderful, generous, incredible, progressive, forward thinking about having a woman on the court. But when Morgan came, the very first morning that she arrived, she popped into my chambers, and we didn't do a lot of popping into each other's chambers in those days. She popped into my chambers and said, "Want to go across the street for a latte?" And I thought, yes, I do. And it was great to work with her before her ascension to the Ninth Circuit bench, and I know what an amazing judge she is and how happy they are to have her. Also great thanks to Christine Williams, who founded this program. She served on the Alaska Supreme Court's Fairness, Diversity, and Equality Committee that I chaired for a number of years. And it was her idea to have a December luncheon with free CLE credits and free lunch and to highlight some of the amazing stars in our bench and to provide inspiration to others by hearing their stories. And so she is the one she's our founding mother. And for many years, we had many sponsors for this, but now she is the sponsor, her Outlook law firm, as well as the Alaska Bar, which of course staffed the front door today and provided a lot of backup. And in particular, we are so grateful that this came together on a little bit on the late side, and they were so wonderful to highlight it and do several email announcements to the bar of the program. This is the second year we've had sort of snowy, icy weather, and again, we're Alaskans, so appreciate your intrepid travel to be here through town. So the purpose of this is to provide a glimpse of the diversity within and adjacent to our profession. And I think I'd like just to take a moment to recognize one of the inspirations for many of us in starting on the bench as women, and that was Justice Sandra Day O'Connor, whose funeral was today in Washington, D.C., and a group of women judges on the East Coast, as well as women chief justices from around the country, attended as an NEWJ and CCJ delegation. And they sent me pictures today saying that they were sorry that I wasn't there, but I said that I'm someplace just as important, even more important, because the purpose of this program is to open doors, to provide inspiration, which is what Justice O'Connor did for all of us. She opened the doors not only for women on the bench, but for women in our profession. And when she was appointed, a tiny fraction of the law school classes were women. And of course, as we know now, more than half of law school graduating classes are women. So today we have 4 amazing panelists, and you're going to hear the stories, their personal stories of their career journeys, how their families and life experiences guided and influenced them, and the obstacles they faced and how they overcame those obstacles. And they have had, all 4 of them, a significant impact on their communities, and I can't wait to hear their stories. So without further ado, we're going to start. I'm just going to go down the table here with Adhika Singh, who is a senior staff attorney at the Public Rights Project. She has had a decade of national and local administrative and legislative advocacy experience in administrative and legislative reforms, such as criminal justice reforms, racial justice reforms, immigrant rights works. She worked for Senator Patrick Leahy's U.S. Senate Judiciary Committee, the United States Department of Justice Civil Rights Division, and for the chapters of a number of states' ACLU chapters, including right here in Alaska, we have Susan Orlansky, who helped encourage her to do this. She is new to Alaska and was a bit shy, so I appreciate that Susan is right here down in front. But pretty soon we're all going to be friendly faced because her career has been amazing. Again, she's worked not only in Alaska for the ACLU, but in Idaho and Michigan. After graduating from law school at the University of Pennsylvania, where she was senior editor of the Law Review, she clerked for Justice Bridget McCormick of the Michigan Supreme Court, U.S. District Court Judge Gerald McHugh in Philadelphia, and Judge Theodore McKee on the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Third Circuit. And we look forward to hearing her story. So thank you for going first.
Well, get to know a lot of you soon. I know 4 people here. Yeah, still new to Alaska. I've been here almost 2 years now, with a year and a half away in between. That time to work in Idaho on a number of civil rights issues, including working on challenges to book bans and to CRT laws and sports bans and abortion cases. So happy to be back here. I now work for a national organization working full-time on abortion access. And most of my work takes me to Missouri. We just had hearings in the Supreme Court last week. And this is one of the first times that I haven't been serving the community that I live in. And so I'm really grateful to be included and invited to speak here today. I don't have much of a speech, but just some reflections to share. I think I'm probably just a product of great mentors and moments. And I'm 6 months pregnant, and there's a lot going on in the world. So if I cry, it's just things very much at the surface.
My family fled through civil wars, one in India and one in Iraq. And you know, frankly, the time in my family's life we were most secure and happy was probably in Ramadi, Iraq, before the first Gulf War started. I think it gets softer as they get older and really welcome. It's a good thing. But my family found it enormously difficult to adjust to the United States. And you know, I still find it really difficult to accept my identity as an immigrant in America and as an Indian American. I think that the trauma that my parents experienced led them to be just incapable of being good parents. So I grew up feeling pretty inadequate and without much worth. I also grew up feeling an enormous sense of injustice and unfairness and powerlessness. And as I always had a lot of fight in me. And you know, just I think one of the things that's really motivated my career is just wanting to check abuse of power. And you know, just the exploitation of vulnerable people. And I was very, very lucky. I had this amazing high school English teacher. And in fact, Jed McKee on the Third Circuit, when he had one of his, you know, painting unveils, you know, a lot of people came from all over his life, and he also recognized his high school English teachers being tremendously impactful and supportive. And Mr. Wallach, I'm still very close to him. I actually sent him a draft op-ed that I authored this morning to get his input. You know, he really kind of set me on my path. Again, a moment in history. I started college with September 11th and the declaration of the Iraq War and the climate change movement. I was very lucky to meet wonderful do-gooder people and friends. And you know, I will say I did struggle to figure out how to be useful. You know, I didn't, you know, I knew that, you know, that I was good at some things, but I didn't know how to be of use. And I felt very strongly that I needed to do something worthwhile, and something service oriented. And it was Mr. Wallach, you know, who suggested law school. He actually went to Columbia Law School and was up here as a Vista after law school, but eventually he decided that his calling was really in teaching. And you know, he said, I think that you really think about law school and you should talk to my friend Ken. He's the legal director of the Asian American Legal Defense Fund in New York. I said, okay, sure, I'll go talk to Ken. And then Ken said, you should talk to Chandra at the ACLU. And you know, Chandra gave me an opportunity to volunteer with ACLU National for a number of months as a translator on a guest worker case. And they eventually, you know, hired me as a legal assistant. That led to me being encouraged to do some, you know, on the Obama wagon, to go down to DC to lobby around reforms that we were seeking around the way that law enforcement agencies use race in targeting certain communities. I was really hesitant to go to law school. I mean, I grew up on food stamps and free lunch and knew that I wanted to do something, you know, good that was not going to be lucrative. And, you know, I just didn't know how I would pay for a legal education. And so, you know, it took me some time. I was 30 when I went to law school. And, you know, I chose a law school that gave me a lot of money to do the kind of work I wanted to do. It was an extremely lonely experience. You know, I think there were a lot of resources for students like me, but not a lot of peers. I think 250 out of 255 of us went to go work at, you know, great law firms, and, you know, certainly, you know, partner with people at those firms now. But, you know, I definitely felt like a misfit, older, you know, very committed to racial justice and gender justice. and, you know, just not, just, yeah, didn't have a lot of peers. And so I spent a lot of my time in law school, interning and volunteering with the ACLU, the Civil Rights Division, and Senator Leahy's Judiciary Committee team. And so I will say that I feel, you know, extremely lucky to have landed in a place where, and thanks to people like Susan Olansky and Ashley Villanona, Bill Shanahan's back there, you know, and a number of other mentors at the ACLU and elsewhere who have planted seeds, who've encouraged me, you know, who've shared opportunities. You know, one challenge I will share is I found it easier over the course of my career to advocate for other people. You know, the LGBTQ work that I had the privilege of doing and still do, you know, felt really, really meaningful to me. Working on book bans, you know, critical and wonderful. There have been a couple of instances in my career now in particular where I'm involved in cases where my own humanity is being adjudicated, you know, as a pregnant person, as a woman of color. And I think one challenge is figuring out, you know, how to use the passion and use the skill set. But I'm finding myself resisting wanting to be the story. And, you know, I get asked, just asked to write an op-ed from my perspective, as a pregnant person that might benefit from health exception and an abortion law, that we are trying to keep in place. Yeah, it's a challenge to try to figure out, you know, how to make that experience and that connection to the issue useful and meaningful. So I will probably close there and just say that I'm here in Alaska because I just feel immense joy and peace to live here. I could, you know, live anywhere and in the US anyway. And, you know, I've lived in over 70 places in my life. Half of that was my parents doing and, you know, the movement and being an asylum seeker. But half of it was mine. You know, I sort of absorbed the need to move for opportunity, to move for survival, to move for advancement. And I think I've been looking to, you know, put down an anchor somewhere for a while. And my husband and I really puzzled through, you know, how could we make it work? You know, I was 36 when I had my son, and we were in DC. We had, you know, good jobs and, but really wanted to lean into parenting and wanted to enjoy that. And my husband is a primary parent now, he's always made a lot more money than me, but I am really committed to doing the work that I'm doing. And so I'm trying to figure out how do we live on one moderate nonprofit income and, you know, raise our kid the way that we want to, spending a lot of time with him. How can we afford that? And, you know, where can we have peace and ease? And so Alaska is where we've chosen, and we feel really lucky to be here. And I, you know, probably there's a part of me, I think a lot of folks who come up here are rejecting, you know, or leaving behind things and wanting to create some distance. I think that's probably true for me, wanting to create some distance from, you know, family, and from overconsumption and rat race. And so yeah, just really happy to get to do what I get to do with smart people who really care about the issues that we're working on. I get to live in a really beautiful, easy place to live.
You feel lucky, we're lucky to have you, and even if you may not know where that's going to change, you know. Heard your story, so we're glad you're in Alaska. And no better community for balance and work-life, balancing your career and your home work-life balance. That's really the reason a lot of people in our profession are here. They've chosen to be here because they love to do something outdoors, or there are other things they want to do. Next we have Erin Schutt. Erin is the president and CEO of Doyon Limited and is responsible for working with its board of directors to set the Doyon family of companies' overall direction and to provide leadership to its senior management team. He's actually worked for Doyon for 17 years, since 2006, and prior to being named president and CEO, he served as senior vice president and chief operating officer. But he was one of ours first. He clerked for Justice Alex Brenner of the Alaska Supreme Court after graduating from law school at Stanford. His brother, Ethan, clerked the year before for Justice Carbonetti, his twin brother, I should say. He did his undergraduate work at Washington State University and also holds a Master's of Science in Civil Engineering from Stanford. And after his clerkship with us and before joining Doyon, Aaron worked in private practice at Heller Ehrman, Snossett Chambers, Sachs Miller and Munson, and he serves on the board of directors for North Rim Bank and the University of Alaska Fairbanks. And we really look forward to hearing his story. So thank you so much for being with us today, Aaron.
Just a faith. Great to see you again. All these years. So I'll tell a few stories as well. There are two themes in my professional career. One is when somebody challenges me, I'm too dumb to kind of figure out that maybe I'm just too dumb. I'm gonna react to it somehow. So that's one side. And then I've also had many experiences on the opposite end of the spectrum, where I've gotten a really good piece of advice from a friend or colleague. And sometimes it takes me a little while to process it, but usually I get there and I make a change. So I'll start with a couple of I'm too dumb to give up stories. One of them, I'm from Tok, and we're known for the people up there, friends of mine that say, if you're gonna be dumb, you gotta be tough. And that's kind of Tok. Tok is a wonderful place. I have many friends there. But if you go out, you get your snow machine stuck in overflow, like I did with my dad once. You spend half a day, it's 20 below and water up to your knees to get the thing out and get home. At the end of the day, that was pretty tough. We did it. And that's just kind of the way I am. But as wonderful as Tok was, when I went to college, number one, nobody really advised me, my parents included, who were educated, but on where to go. They just kind of, people in Tok just kind of let me make my own decisions, I guess, which was good. But when I got to college, most people had had a lot of preparation that I hadn't had. So advisors and people in schools of engineering all assumed I would fail. In fact, my very first advisor I had, which was at CU Boulder, basically told me that you're likely going to be at another college by end of the first semester of the first year. So back then, maybe they still do it. They would post your names and your scores on exams outside the door at the engineering school on major exams. So all first year stuff, chemistry, physics, calculus, all that stuff. And so I made it a point my first year to make sure my name was right up there at the top of the list. Sometimes it actually was at the very top. And then I had no real commitment to that school, I guess. I enjoyed a lot of things, met some great friends, but eventually transferred to Washington State, my brother and I have a twin brother. In part because I felt like no one in that school of engineering ever cared about me. And that's probably still true. She probably wasn't one of my friends. At Washington State, I had the exact opposite experience because luck shines on you every now and then. So one of the very first people I met in the School of Engineering was a professor who was looking for someone to drive with him to play men's league hockey in Spokane a couple nights a week. So that worked out pretty well. And he was a great mentor, steered me on my course, gave me advice, pushed me. When I was applying to graduate schools, he knocked a bunch off the list and said, not good enough. So that's how I ended up at Stanford. It was a wonderful place to go to graduate school. But then I had another experience. My master's was coming to a close, was doing well, but wasn't really sure what I wanted to do with my life yet. My brother had gone straight to law school. He was having a wonderful time. I worked very, very, very hard in my master's degree, so I was kind of wondering what I should do. And I said to my advisor, senior advisor, by the way, I'm thinking about applying to the law school. My brother's there. And he said, get out of my office, I never want to see you again. Seriously. He wanted a PhD student, not a law student. So I never really intended to be a lawyer. But somehow I ended up there. So immediately after that super bad interaction with my advisor for a while, I went down the hall and there was a guy in his office, a younger professional there. And he gave me a piece of advice that I shared with many young people ever since. And it was pretty simple. He said, look, you have 2 or 3 great options. Right. You can go into the workforce, you have a master's degree from Stanford. You can do what your brother said and go across campus, and I'm sure the law school's great, and it is. So fine. Or you can stay here and find a different advisor in this wonderful engineering school and do your PhD. So it doesn't really matter what you do. You've got 3 great choices, pick among them, be happy. I did end up at the law school. And then I came up here and I clerked. And then I was working for Hiller Ehrman, big firm, and I really enjoyed it. Judge Kristen's husband, Jim, was my boss. Wonderful person, mentor of mine. I spent all day with him yesterday, including a lot of this. So enjoyed that immensely, representing a lot of smaller clients, transaction matters, tribes, and corporations and things. Out of the blue, I got a call from a law school classmate that is a Native woman that is now running the program at ASU. She does not remember this, but she said to me, what are you doing? Well, I'm practicing law, I'm getting better and doing all this stuff. She says, I bet you didn't write about that in the law school essay to get into Stanford, did you? No. You need to go directly work for Native people. Well, I thought about that for a while. Yeah, it took me a little while, about a year. But that's when I moved over to Sandusky Chambers that just does the tribal work. And the difference in the 2 paths there was stark. Great experience at the big firm. I was doing very small things and very large projects, wonderful education for me. On the other hand, when I went over to Sandusky, I was doing everything on very small projects, help do a low-income tax credit project in Tanacross, with homes. Tanacross is 10 miles from where I grew up. First new housing since they relocated the village in 1968. This would have been like 2000. First new home, so people that I grew up with were getting new homes for the first time. That kind of work, based on that one little piece of advice from a good friend of mine. So then how did I leave the access practice of law? That was another thing. It was just kind of a one-liner. So Ori Williams was the president of the lab for years. He was at an event with my wife, who's also down at Myra Munson's house in Juneau, and said, Aaron needs to come work for Doyle. And I went, well, I'm sure. I had never aspired to work for Doyle. Sorry, I missed the first part of the story. Ori had approached me first. And I said, cleverly, because I was at the same firm in the office next to Marissa, if Marissa says it's a good idea, I'll do it. 6 months later or so, he's at this event, Myra Munson's house. Just comes home and she says, "Hey, you can work for ODOT." I keep my word, that's another big tough voice, but you give your word. So, a little bit later, 2006, I went to Doyon. And at the time leaving Synopsis, I loved my practice. I loved what I was doing out in rural Alaska, working with tribes, transactional work. I told them, well, I think this will be about 3 years. I'll be back in about 3 years. But it's now been 17. And the reason at Doyon for me, Native Corporation, we know who we work for. It's my friends and family I grew up with, helping improve their economic outcomes, advocating on policy. I feel like a lot of the work we do at Doyon, other than Native corporations, some tribal businesses, nobody does it. Like, nobody goes and advocates on the state budget on stuff that doesn't matter for their corporation and spends all their political capital doing that. Any other state or any other corporation in America. But we do it. We go to DC and we work on land issues and federal issues. We go to juvenile, we do that. We occasionally take on big things that have inspired me through my career. Myself and a couple of people at SERI and ASRC, we helped reform the SBA's 8A program early in my career at Doyon. I don't know how many people screamed at me on that. And we, in my view, still, we saved the program by reforming it. I had Congress people literally spitting on me across the small table. They were so mad at us. I had people in our own community calling us traitors for what they thought we were undermining the program. And at the end of it, we were super proud of the work we did. So that's the kind of thing at Doyon that has kept me there as long as I've been there. I'll close with the last piece of advice I got, which will inspire the next part of my career. So the first day, I think it was the very first day I was Doyon's president in 2011. Margie Brown was the longtime CEO at SERI. And my twin brother was working for her at the time. So I go over to Margie, I'll give a little advice. And one of the pieces of advice she gave me was, about 10 years in, if things are going well, you should start making plans for your exit. Again, not a piece of advice that is probably widely given in corporate America. People stay, they stay, but we're not the same corporation as others. So she said that's a big part of it. There's two halves. One, like, there are plenty of people that go out, people step in behind you just fine. It's not your corporation. It's your corporation and it's not your corporation. It's your corporation, it's our corporation. So I always thought that was really good advice. And then she also said, there are so many things with Native and tribal politics that you could end up getting drug out by the feet. And you don't control it all. Some of things just happen. Politics happens, bad things, economic things happening. Like, remember the last 5 years, at that time, there have been a lot of transitions in corporations. She said, remember that too. So I did remember that, and I have given my notice to my board a couple of years ago, actually, now that at the end of my contract, I will move on. I will find another thing to do that equally as inspiring, I hope, to me, and continue my career. But again, I think that, well, it's just over 2 years now. Well, by the end of that road, again, just too dumb to not keep fighting. And occasionally I listen to people. So thanks for the opportunity to talk to you all today.
Aaron. Next, we have Megan Sigvana Topkop, known to her friends as Sig. Sig is a Nubia with family roots in Nome, Mary's Igloo, and White Mountain. She currently serves as the staff attorney at Quark Inc., providing legal services to 19 tribes in the Bering Strait region, ranging from election assistance to providing guidance on personnel matters to tribal justice development. She also serves on the Nome Common Council and it's her second term of elected office. But she has so many other things she does, and I think she must not know how to say no. Because she serves on the Board of Governors of the Alaska Bar Association, on the Alaska Legal Services Board of Directors, the Alaska Bar Foundation Board of Trustees, and the Alaska Municipal League Board of Directors. I think your life must be meetings and meetings. Her undergraduate degree is from Dartmouth College, and she earned her law degree from the University of Oregon School of Law, and we very much look forward to hearing your story, Cindy.
So my inability to say no to things has gotten probably all of us into a lot of trouble here. So bear with me. So it's gonna be a lot of stream of consciousness. Because I did not realize that I should have probably prepared something and was more prepared for a question and answer scenario. But uflulota ativasta ravana tanixina megan taka koyarunga, where you were sisina sofa mirunga, wonga stafford quirky. So it's for Indigenous people, it's really important for us to share who our family is and who we're named after. So for me, my namesake is my great uncle Ed Topcock. His Ipak name was Silvana, and I'm very fortunate to carry that with me. He was an incredible carver and artist and person, and honestly, for me, that's the most important role that I carry with me as a human being, is the fact that because I bear his name, I also bear his relations and his responsibilities in life. So his grandchildren are my grandchildren. I call them my tutiks, my grandchildren. They take care of them. They take care of me just as if I was Ed. And for me, that's more important than anything else in the world, is having those familial relationships. And it's something that's really important to me in the practice of law. So a lot of the work that I do at COERC is centered around healing, around family, around our traditional cultural values, and trying to enable tribes to exercise their sovereignty for the betterment of our people. And as part of the Board of Governors, so if you haven't read the Diversity Commission's report, I highly recommend that you go on the bar's website and do that. I certainly was really astonished when I realized that only 6% of the lawyers in our profession in the state are non-white. And of that 6%, I think it's only about 2% who are Alaska Native. And yet we are 20 to 25% of the state's population. That's a stark disproportionality. And that goes for a lot of different things that Alaska Native people experience, whether it's the foster care system, where something like 50–60% of children in foster care are Alaska Native, again, 20 to 25% of the state's population. Native women are more likely to be murdered, to be sexually assaulted. And unfortunately, in a lot of ways, my life has been a reflection of those statistics. I grew up in a home that experienced a lot of domestic violence. I grew up in a home that had a lot of substance misuse. I grew up in a home where historic trauma has taken its toll. My grandfather, we suspect, probably went to boarding school or was beaten in the education system like so many of his peers. He wouldn't, even though he was a first language speaker of Inkpah, he refused to speak it to his kids, to his wife, who had been adopted when she was 4 years old out of Nome and paraded around Oregon and Washington to white families, along with her younger brother Fred, removed from her mother because she was a single mom, and denied the opportunity to grow up in her homelands, learning her culture, her language, her identity as an Inuk. And that's something that carried with her, the way that she raised her children. I frequently grew up hearing my dad say that he was an apple, that he was red on the outside but white on the inside. And for a child growing up, and all of that was tough. I think it's no surprise a lot of BIPOC people have higher than average ACEs scores, adverse childhood experiences. And that's certainly no exception for me, for my brother, for my cousins, for my parents, grandparents. And so I think in a lot of ways, that's what fueled me to want to enter into a profession where I didn't feel represented. And to try to use that knowledge and skill set and work within that system for the betterment of our own people. Because I think so often we've ended up on the other side. And even to this day, we tend to be the defendants in the courtroom. We're not the attorneys, we're not the judges. And that can be really demoralizing to look around a space and realize that you're the only woman, you're the only Native. When I first ran for city council in Nome, it was all older white gentlemen, all perfectly wonderful people. Our politics aside, we had lots of disagreements on that front, but they were good people. And so it's not to say that there aren't good people doing legal work who are judges, who are attorneys, but for someone like me to not see someone like myself is tough. And so I feel like I've kind of clawed my way into these spaces thinking, well, if I'm gonna complain about it, then I need to do something about it. And just as much as I feel like we've had all of these adverse experiences as BIPOC people and experienced hardship and trauma, our ancestors also passed down a lot of resilience and a lot of strength. And that's what I lean really heavily on in the work that I do. Personally, I've struggled a lot, especially recently, with that inability to say no and being maybe a little bit of a workaholic. I think what I realized about myself is that I tend to put aside my own personal struggles and bury myself in work because I feel like there are some things that I don't have control over, but what I can control is how many hours I put in the office and all of the tribal councils that I can meet with and the tribal courts that I can help keep up and running. And I realized that there's so much healing that we need to do individually within ourselves before we can help our communities. And I think that's something I've seen a lot of people in my similar position struggle with. And is why I feel like the work that I do is so important because so much of it's about healing. We have to find restorative practices to help people dig at the root cause of why do they act out, why do they commit crimes, why do they, break laws? How can we really move forward as a people if we're not centering our own justice systems and our own value systems? I really don't think it's going to work if our people continue to go through the state system. What we see is people getting penalized, hyper-criminalized, becomes a revolving door. And I really worry that it feels like we're caught in the cycle where we're in a system where we're not represented and it's not serving us, Alaska Native people, in the way that it needs to. And we need to be given the ability and the space to create our own systems to handle matters within our own communities. One way that we've been doing this in the region is with youth, in particular juvenile delinquency. And honestly, those have been some of the most profound and also healing moments of my own life is participating in circle peacemaking. So we'll bring together the youth who got into trouble, tribal council members, family members, community members, and we all sit down in a circle with nothing, ideally nothing in between us, no table. And we talk about what happened and why it happened. And often in these circles, it comes up that a lot of us are also struggling with a lot with childhood trauma, with substance use, with our mental health. And it's not to just kind of sit there and talk about, oh, poor me and everything's miserable and everything's hard, but it's realizing that there are other people going through that same struggle and that there are also people there that care about you and want to see you succeed. So we had this one circle in Brevik, it was earlier this year, And the thing that really just stood out to me is every single person in that circle kept saying to those youth who got into trouble, we love you, we care about you, we want to see you succeed, we don't want to see you in trouble. What can we do to support you? Why did you behave this way? Because there's a reason that people behave the way that they do. And what I've seen is that hurt people hurt people. When you don't have that, when you don't resolve that hurt, it just festers and it leaks out and it starts hurting everybody around you. And I see that in my own life, my own personal relationships, where a lot of the hurt from my childhood, the anger that I've held on to since I was a child, that in some ways has driven me to be quote unquote successful, to go to law school, to go to an Ivy League college, to practice law, pass the bar exam. Which, holy smokes, just that whole journey to get there was rough. I mean, I come from a family that there's no 4-year degrees. My mom dropped out of community college when she became pregnant with me. My dad died in a plane crash when I was 11, the day before Thanksgiving, so that was fun. But there's just, it feels like one thing after another that has been a roadblock in trying to get to where I am sometimes. And for every person I had who encouraged me to continue on despite the adversity, there was also a person there who was saying, oh, let's be realistic. At Dartmouth, no, there's no way you're gonna get in. That was something my high school counselor told me. I was fortunate I had a professor in high school because I was taking community college classes, and she flipped over the textbook. It was a Native American history class. She flipped over the textbook and she was like, this is Colin Calloway. He teaches at Dartmouth. You're gonna go there. And if it hadn't been for her, I would have not known what Dartmouth was. I would have never applied. I had recently, I think maybe because of my SAT or ACT scores, I've gotten a letter from Dartmouth saying, we have this lovely fly-in program for Native students. You should apply and come visit our campus for free. I was like, what the heck? This seems like a scam through the trash. The professor was like, oh my gosh, you did what? But it's people like her who encouraged me and showed me that there were other possibilities in life, that it didn't have to be just what my life had been up to that point with all of the hardship. And I think just kind of like that, similar to Erin, being tough and maybe a little bit dumb, stubborn, wanting to keep going despite it all. I feel like I managed to make it work with a lot of support along the way. And so one thing that I would just say to everybody here is, any chance you have to be an ally to a BIPOC person, to someone who is underrepresented in our profession, please extend that hand. You never know even how small an act of kindness or a word might be, how much that might impact that person down the road. And to make space for them to share their stories, to be able to speak up about what their experience is, to try to empathize and understand with what it is that they're experiencing. Knowing that you will never have that same exact experience and can never truly understand what it is that they're going through. But just to say, I hear you, I appreciate you, you belong. Because if I didn't have people like that along the way who were constantly telling me that you belong, I don't think I would have made it as far as I did. And I think it's so important. All of us have a role to play in that. And if that's the only piece of advice I could give today, that's what I would encourage and ask people to do, is just extend a hand to anybody who might need it and give them all support that you just don't know what day they've had, what they're going through in life, what obstacles they faced. But it never hurts to be kind. So Koyana, for listening to my stream of consciousness, someone please take away the microphone and never invite me to events ever again.
Finally, we'll turn to Linda Limon, who is the owner of Limon Law Firm, where she specializes in family law. And she's such an empathetic person and listener. And we saw that when she came up earlier today with a little pack of Kleenex. I was rifling through my purse, I didn't have one. So she's clearly a mom. And probably has a good stock of Kleenex under her law, given the work that she does. She's really known as the shining stars of the Alaska Family Bar. She's the past co-chair of the Alaska Bar Association Family Law Section, a fellow of the American Academy of Matrimonial Lawyers, and holds membership in many family law organizations, including the Association of Family and Conciliation Courts. After graduating from the University of Wyoming Law School, she came up here to clerk. She clerked for Alaska Superior Court Judges John Reese and then Elaine Andrews. She went into practice, in private practice then with Allison Mendel and Carla Huntington before founding her own practice with her husband, Herman Walker, who now serves on the Superior Court bench. Linda holds a master's in business administration and a master's degree in global finance, both from Alaska Pacific University, and she's taught trial skills at her alma mater, University of Wyoming's College of Law. So, Linda, we look forward to hearing your story and thank you for being here.
For inviting me in. Wow, those were incredible stories, weren't they? It is always a pleasure to hear other people's stories. One of the things that I really enjoy about hearing other people's stories is there's always a connection. So, is that better? Okay, thank you. There's always a connection. Each one of those stories I connected with, and I had my own story that was similar to one of the things that they brought up. So I always appreciate that because you realize that we are all connected. And I especially feel in Alaska, there is no 6 degrees of separation in Alaska. It might be 3, but I honestly think it's probably 2. And when I say we live in a small city, I'm talking about the entire state. The entire state is really connected. So I want to just briefly tell you my story and just to give you an idea of where I've come from and how much has happened between my grandfather and grandmother and me. So my grandfather, Jesus Limon, and my grandmother, Angela Martinez, who I unfortunately never got to meet. She died when my father was in his early 20s. But they both immigrated here to the United States from Mexico. And they immigrated to Fort Collins, Colorado, when my father was born on a farm there. And my grandfather was a migrant worker, a beat migrant worker. And just to sort of fast forward to our younger daughter, Lucero, in high school, she was doing a story. Both girls were in the Spanish immersion program here. So she was doing a story history project on Cesar Chavez. So she calls her grandfather and says, can you tell me the story of my great grandfather? And, you know, where did he come from? What did he do? So he starts to tell that story to Lucero. And my grandfather had a 2nd grade education, moved here, spoke very, very broken English, Spanish. And they moved here to Fort Collins. As I said, he was a migrant worker, beet farm worker. So my father goes on to tell Lucero, or Lucero in Spanish, that then your grandfather got a better job. Well, what did he do, Grandpa? He worked in the quarries outside of Fort Collins, Colorado. What did he do? He took the big rock and he broke it up into little rock. And so that was his better job. And then my father goes on to tell Lucero, and then he got his best job, the job that he retired from, and that's why we moved to Cheyenne, Wyoming. He worked for the railroad. And so, of course, Lucero's seeing her parents and what we've done. And she says, well, Grandpa, he was a conductor, right? He drove the train. No, Lucero, he didn't. He was what they called a scrapper. So Lucero, what's a scrapper, Grandpa? That is the person that walks around the yard, the railroad yard, and picks up all the metal scrap. And that was his best job. And that's what he retired from. So then you fast forward to his granddaughter, who has multiple degrees, has a law degree, has a couple masters, and has moved to Alaska, made this her home, and has had a successful law practice, has raised two successful girls, and has a wonderful husband that supports her in all of this. My father just had a high school education. So again, like some of them shared, college was not like in my story. I didn't see anybody with a 4-year degree, but I was very tenacious and always wanted to be a lawyer. And the University of Wyoming offered me that. It's a state school and it's affordable. So I went on to Wyoming undergrad and then went on to law school. And in my class, we were at the point where we were seeing almost 50% women. So that I really enjoyed. But again, only a handful of people of color. I was one of 3 Hispanics in my class, to 1 Mexican male, 1 Mexican female, and myself. And then Herman Walker, my husband, was the only Black in our class. And we had 1 African American in each class. And I think we had a couple of other Hispanics in a couple of the other classes. So there was only a handful of us out of those 200 students. Growing up in high school, I always wanted to fit in, but I never quite fit in. I didn't fit in with the Mexicans. There's a lot of Mexicans in Wyoming and Colorado. So that was the, most of the Latinos and Hispanics were Mexican. Didn't quite fit in, not dark skin enough, didn't speak Spanish fluently, didn't have an accent, didn't quite fit in with the white group. Okay, can you imagine trying to have the Farrah Fawcett look with all these curls? It didn't work. So I would try to fit in with them, didn't quite fit in. It was difficult. It was very difficult. You could not quite find your way. And in the 1980s, having big curly hair, looking ethnic, right? That was not a thing. You did not want to have that. In fact, growing up in high school, as I mentioned earlier, my grandfather was Jesus Limon. So when my father grew up, he became John Lyman. Never spoke Spanish to me in the house. My grandparents would speak Spanish to me, both on my mother and my father's side, but my parents did not, because that was not something that they wanted to do. They wanted to assimilate. So names are very important. And they changed my name, something very simple. Take the accent off the O and just say John Lyman. That sounds much more white than John Limon. So those are the things that I struggled with. I wanted to fit in, didn't quite fit in. Fast forward to college, when I was a junior in college, I chose to study abroad. And I went to the country of Malta. It's an island in the Mediterranean below Sicily. And the first thing that they said when they saw me and saw my name, "Oh, nice to meet you, Linda Limon." And I kind of stepped back and I was like, wow, that is my name. And I should pronounce it that way. Let me put the accent back over the O. And in Malta, that's who I became, Linda Limon. I also used to wear my hair very short because I was very self-conscious about all of this. And it was hard to handle when you were younger and nobody accepted it. In high school, you did not feel like you fit in. I was there for 6 months. So you can imagine I never cut my hair. My hair grew when I was there. My name started being pronounced the correct way. And I came back to the United States a different person and realized that it is so important to embrace who you are and what you are. Because when I was in Europe, I went to Greece, I went to Egypt, I traveled around Europe, and in Malta, of course, everybody welcomed me because there I kind of looked like all of them. When I was in Egypt, they thought I was an Egyptian. When I was in Greece, I passed for Greek. And in fact, we found out the Maltese that we hung out with when we were there going to college. Later on, they said, when the 7 Americans walked into the cantina, which is the cafeteria there, it's a very Catholic country, and most people don't live in dorms. They don't have dorms. It's a very small island, so they live with their families. So they all meet for breakfast in the cantina, lunch in the cantina, and then go home for dinner. So apparently when the 7 Americans came in, they all looked at each other and said, "Who is that Maltese girl with them? We've never seen her on the island." Right? So I started to realize that it's very important to embrace who you are. And so when I came back and I went to law school, I followed undergrad and went straight into law school. I started to become who I am today and embrace who I am today. In fact, so much so that when we had our girls, Lucero and Dupree, one, I wanted to make sure that their names were very important. So Dupree Limon Walker Dupree is Herman's mother's maiden name. In the Mexican culture, you take last names as your name, and you take it from your family. So it's Dupree Limon Walker and Lucero Limon Walker. That's my mother's maiden name. And I introduced to the girls, it was very important for them to not have what I have. It was very important for them to graduate from high school and go out into this world and have confidence of who they are and be self-sufficient. And also speak another language. Because that was taken away from me, and for no other reason than my parents just chose not to speak with me. So we made sure that the girls went to Spanish immersion and graduated from high school completely fluent in Spanish. We introduced them and made them confident about their culture, both their Black culture and their Mexican culture, and to celebrate it. And in fact, this generation of kids, they embrace this. They really embrace like all of who they are. I mean, our daughters went to West High, one of the most diverse high schools in the country. And the other two most diverse, by the way, are here in Anchorage as well, Bartlett and East. And they called themselves Blexican, okay? And there were other names for the other mixed children, all right, Blexican. So they came out of Alaska having that strength of confidence of who they were, speaking in their own language and speaking English and Spanish, and being confident, and then went on to go to Howard University. And that was wonderful. They both followed each other into Howard and really got to, again, embrace their culture and who they are. And I think that's one thing that Alaska has provided is support. I look around the room and there are mentors in this room that have mentored me since we moved up here in 1992, and it is all about people caring for other people. I look right here in front of me, and we've got Judge Pamela Scott Washington, who we met early on about the first 2 weeks we were here, and her and I started having a conversation, and she said, "Well, my judge hasn't hired the extra clerk yet. She clerked for Judge Reese. Let me talk with him and see if I can, help you out and get you an interview." So she went to Judge Reese and said, "Well, I know this woman, she's really smart and bright, and she, all of those things." And he looked at her and he said, "Well, is she any fun?" And he goes, I'm not sure, Linda, if I helped you out or not." And of course, she did. And again, small world. She moved into the apartment at ASU Law School when my husband Herman Walker's friends were moving out of the apartment to move to Wyoming to go to law school. So it's kind of full circle. It's again a very small state. Let me just look here at my notes and see what else I would like to share with you briefly. I'd just like to briefly tell you about working up here. And having a career up here. I think, I'm not sure who mentioned it, but mentors. I just want to briefly touch on that. Mentors are so important up here. I had mentors when I first moved up here, met people, got jobs, went on to work for law firms. And what I noticed about the lawyers here and the attorneys here, they are very warm and welcoming. And so is the whole community. Once people know that you're going to move up here and stay up here, they welcome you. And so one of the things that I definitely want to do is I've been in my career now 30 years. And I think it's really important to make sure that we too are reaching out to the younger lawyers and providing mentorship and supporting them, because that is so important, not only in our career, but also just raising families up here. I hear young children, they're having young children up here, and I would be happy to share what I know, because I've raised 2 girls up here. So I think mentorship is so important, and it's important to give back. And with that, I could definitely talk some more, because I always enjoy sharing my story, but I just want to tell you, thank you very much for having all of us. It's been wonderful to hear everybody else's story, and I appreciate all of you for being here and listening to our stories. Thank you.
Well, thank you all for being here and sharing your own journeys, and so many similar themes emerged from all of them. But I think Linda's last note really applies to every person up here who has reached out and lent a helping hand to others in the community, and we are appreciative that you were able to come today. I thank again Christine Williams for having this idea in the beginning, and every year following through with it and finding such amazing panelists with the help of Mara Rabinowitz. And so thank you for coming, and have a wonderful holiday.